Many African countries and other friends oppose UN Human Rights Council resolution on Ethiopia. And IGAD says upcoming polls in Kenya and Somalia a litmus test for constitutionalism. Greetings everyone and welcome to the news. We begin our stories with breaking news. The Combined Security Force of Ethiopia is charging forward, notching up new victories against the enemy. We've just learned that the forces have now cleared new towns such as Mersa and Garara and are moving forward indomitably. The forces, which also controlled higher areas of Zobolat Kobo front, have now controlled other strategic areas in the northern direction of Raya, with similar victories in other fronts. The defense forces have also completely destroyed Esa, and the forces are now closing in on Woldia town. Now moving to other stories, President Sahle-Work Zewde has traveled to Angola after concluding her official visit to Côte d'Ivoire. President Sahle-Work has discussed with President of Angola, João Manuel Lourenço, bilateral issues of mutual concern and current affairs in Ethiopia. Speaking to the president on the current situation in Ethiopia, President Sahle-Work Zewde said Ethiopia's image is not what some Western media outlets report. The Angolan president, on his part, reiterated Angola will not accept any attempt to overthrow the government that is in power legally through elections. Ethiopia is moving forward with the truth it holds as an African brother Angola supports for this, he said. On the other hand, they discussed ways to implement bilateral agreements signed between Ethiopia and Angola. Ethiopia and Angola have been enjoying close bilateral relationship since independence in the 1970s. And Angola is one of the most influential countries in the African Union. Now, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his delegation has arrived in Istanbul, Turkey, to participate in the third Turkey-Africa Partnership Summit. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed held consultative discussion with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on various issues today. Alongside Turkish-African Summit, Ethiopia and Turkey are enjoying to cement their bilateral ties, according to the Prime Minister's recent Twitter message. The historical relations between our two countries have always been rooted in mutual respect. Our partnership continues based on constructive engagement, Abiy remarked. The third Africa-Turkey Partnership Summit will be held under the theme Enhanced Partnership for Common Development and Prosperity. Now, many African countries and other friends of Ethiopia have opposed the UN Human Rights Council resolution on Ethiopia. 15 countries opposed the UN Human Rights Council resolution on Ethiopia. In addition to the 15 countries that opposed the Council's proposal, 11 abstained: Eritrea, India, Gabon, Burkina Faso, China, Namibia, Venezuela, Cuba, Pakistan, the Philippines, Somalia, Russia, Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, and Bolivia are among the countries that have opposed the resolution. Libya, Malawi, Sudan, Senegal, Togo, Mauritania, Bahrain, Bangladesh, Nepal, Uzbekistan, and Indonesia are the 11 countries that abstained from the draft resolution. 22 member states, including 13 African countries, opposed the Council's special meeting on Ethiopia. Moving on, Ethiopian representative to the UN says Ethiopia will not cooperate with any mechanism that may be imposed on it. Ethiopian ambassador to Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, and Romania, permanent representative to the UN office at Geneva, Zennaba Kabede, said the government of Ethiopia never accepts the concept of multilateralism due to the diversion of superpowers that have neo-colonial mentality. Ethiopia believes some superpowers are using multilateralism as a weapon to intervene and exasperate problems against a sovereign nation, he stressed. Haftamo Shagri presents the story as follows.
Can serve to that effect.
Ethiopian ambassador to Switzerland, Austria, Hungary and Romania, permanent representative to the UN office at Geneva and other international organizations in Switzerland, Zennaba Kabede, addressing the 33rd Special Session of UN Human Rights Council on Friday, said that Ethiopia will not cooperate with any mechanisms that may be imposed on it. Ethiopia is being targeted and singled out at the Human Rights Council for defending a democratically elected government, the peace and the future of its people, he underlined. As one of the founders of the League of Nations, the UN, Ethiopia is a firm believer in multilateralism. The mandate and work of Human Rights Council is not to advance altered political objectives. The international community coming together to discuss and decide without legal ground. The United Nations Security Council is continuing its bad act after 80 years without a single representation of African countries. Recently, the concept of multilateralism is not working for Ethiopia, and it is rejected as a democratically elected government. The ambassador stressed the Western powers destabilizes a sovereign nation without legal ground. As part of this move, Ethiopia never accepts this intervention and denounces such improper tendencies made by some foreign superpowers.
Multilateralism, after all these years, is once again being hijacked by a neo-colonialist mentality. Ethiopia is being targeted and singled out at the Human Rights Council for defending a democratically elected government, the peace and the future of its people. As one of the founders of the League of Nations, the UN, Ethiopia is a firm believer in multilateralism. The mandate and work of Human Rights Council is not to advance ulterior political objectives. In recent years, we have seen the same powers oversee the complete destabilization of several countries. We stood alone to defend colonial aggression. Today, Ethiopia confronts this blatant political pressure with other many countries shoulder to shoulder to defend multilateralism.
The initiative of this special session also failed to condemn in violation of human rights, atrocities, the killing of innocent civilians, war crimes, destruction of hospitals that has been orchestrated by TPLF cliques, the ambassador remarked.
The initiative of this special session, on the other hand, failed to condemn the pillage, destruction of property, rape and sexual abuse, use of child soldier by the rebel forces, the TPLF. This terrorist group commanded more than 1,000 trucks delivering humanitarian supplies to the people in Tigray region and used them for military purpose. It destroyed food warehouses, schools, health facilities, industrial parks. The initiators of this special session would not care less. They are determined to impose their will on the government.
The council is being used as an instrument of political pressure. It is a counterproductive effort to embolden the terrorist rebels and exacerbate the situation on the ground. Therefore, the right thing to do is to support our genuine national efforts consistent with principle of subsidiarity. Therefore, the recent thing to do is to support our genuine national efforts consistent with principle of subsidiarity. As far as Ethiopia is concerned, rest assured that the Ethiopian government will continue to ensure accountability, Ambassador Zennaba stressed.
In light of the foregoing, the government of Ethiopia expressed its complete rejection of Resolution A/HRC /S-33/L, we call upon council members to firm principled stand against short-sighted interest and the refused politicization of human rights by rejecting this resolution.
You have exhausted the 5 minutes.
Me and you, and I think to myself.
They may not necessarily have a lot of financial capital, but they have knowledge capital. Give them incentives.
They are playing an incredibly beautiful, strong, enthusiastic diplomatic role. They're fighting, and they're winning.
It's become not only the issue of Ethiopia, it has become the issue of Pan-Africanism.
Welcome back. You're still watching this News Hour. Now, a new wave of Western-led pressure is being exerted on Ethiopia amidst objection by several African nations. The Amnesty International came up with concocted rights abuses in Western Tigray by Amhara forces. The international organization's report was released only hours before the UN Human Rights Council began a video conference special session on Friday to address what it called the grave human rights situation in Ethiopia. Connecting the dots, however, one can see that the new wave is aimed at finding a pretext to further pressurize Ethiopia with fake genocide. In the following reportage, Goshu Malisau sheds more light on it.
The Amnesty International shamelessly depicted a picture of mass detentions, killings and expulsions of ethnic Tigrayans in western Tigray, an area claimed by the Amhara. Since failing to secure the area once the conflict began in November 2020, the TPLF is using the likes of the Amnesty as Trojan horse to put pressure on the government. The rights group pinned its hopes for the trumped-up charge as satellite imagery, but sadly the imagery failed since it was an image taken months back for the same purpose. The rights group never uttered a word about ethnic Amharas targeted when the TPLF invaded the state and ransacked it. A month ago, the TPLF and its Western allies tried in vain to come up with what was known as Humara massacre. They put it in the back burner when the world seemed unwilling to buy it. The rights group's latest fake report seems to reawaken the Humara massacre. In a coordinated attack, the EU's proposal aims to create an international commission of human rights experts on Ethiopia. But this is an open aggression, as the following speech by Joseph Borrell of the EU proves it.
It has been grave violation of human rights by both sides. The fight continues nearby the capital. Ethiopia is one of the issues that we have debated the most this year. And it is also one of my biggest frustrations, because we were not able to react properly to the large-scale human rights violations.
However, some are already voting against a European Union-backed resolution. These nations have indicated that the push to investigate the allegations of violations and abuses is an attempt to take over sovereign prerogatives. The proponents of this proposal must learn to respect and not preempt a sovereign state's prerogative to set up its own national accountability efforts and mechanisms to address human rights and humanitarian law violations. They must cease using the Human Rights Council for unilateral and deservedly self-important actions that hinder cooperative and constructive efforts to change the human rights situation on the ground. Instead, the proponents are weakening the Human Rights Council by turning it into an arena of condemnation and a judicial hall without due process instead of a body for engagement, respect for sovereignty and dialogue. Ethiopia's government has slammed the decision to hold the special session and has urged countries to vote against the draft text. The government made it clear that it will not cooperate with any mechanisms that may be imposed on it, given this is a deliberate destabilization effort.
Now, moving on, the UN Human Rights Council special session is undesirable and provides safe haven for terrorist TPLF through denying the truth. The Ethio-American political science and international relations professor Brooke Hailu Bashar made this remark in an exclusive interview with ETV. He also said the council has opted to remain silent to the atrocities committed by the terrorist TPLF against innocent civilians in Amhara and Afar states. Jerusalem Batia has interviewed him and has filed the following report.
Over the last 27 years, terrorist TPLF group had committed gross human rights abuse, massacres, ethnic violences, and openly looted the country's resources with the aim of dismantling Ethiopia. Its treasonous attack to the Ethiopian Northern Command on November 3, 2020 was a good testimony for this devilish strategy. Since then, TPLF has been continuing its unjustifiable destruction of human lives and properties in the Amhara and Afar regions.
When the TPLF began to invaded the Amhara region and the Afar region, we know that purposely they targeted what? Civilian targets, towns, cities, burned and looted hospitals, looted schools, looted universities, tore up everything. Industrial centers like Kombolcha Industrial Park. It was totally dismantled, settled, and taken back to the north, to Tigray province. And also countless rapes of young girls. And even lately, last week, as one follows in the media, I believe a 72 or a 75-year-old nun. Can you imagine? You know, women being raped in front of their husbands, mothers being raped in front of their 10, 12, 14-year-old sons and daughters, daughters and mothers being raped. All this is being committed by the TPLF. And rather than focus on this group, which is anti-social, anti-Ethiopia, anti-human, rather than focus on this group, which, by the way, pretends, you know, to bring democracy by getting rid of the Ethiopian government, to bring democracy to the Ethiopian people, as if we don't know the behavior of TPLF. We know it for the last 27, 30 years, how they behave.
However, Western countries and their media outlets have not been trying to condemn TPLF atrocities. Rather, they have continued to misinform the public and tarnish the image of Ethiopia. Surprisingly, the UN Human Rights Council called a session to establish a team that investigates atrocities happened in Ethiopia. That was rejection of the joint investigation by AHRC, Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, and the UN Human Rights Council. Hence, Bashar says the planned UN Human Rights Council special session is undesirable.
This is really sad and wrongly placed, because the accusation should have been directed to the default old guard, the old TPLF organization. Of course, they are not a state. They pretend to be a state. They are not a state, but they should have been the ones who should have been accused. So it is really sad that the United Nations Human Rights Council is now being manipulated. I repeat, manipulated, you know, to get back at Ethiopia, and being used by certain quarters and certain countries, you know, to get back at Ethiopia. This is really sad. What will be the consequence? Ethiopians are fighters. The truth is on our side. We will not kneel down. We will not succumb, whether in Ethiopia itself, Ethiopians, or wherever we live in the world. We'll not give up. We'll stand up for our rights.
He reiterates the planned UN Human Rights Council special session as regrettable and provides safe haven for terrorist TPLF through denying the truth.
And completely diverted into Ethiopia attacking the terrorist group. But the actual truth is the terrorist group TPLF is actually attacking Ethiopia.
ያው የአሜሪካ መንግስት እንዴት አህያ ከሚገል ጋር ከብት ከሚገል ጋር ሽማግሌ የታመመ ሽማግሌ መድኃኒት የማያድነው ሽማግሌ ከሚገል ጋር የአሜሪካ መንግስት እንዴት ይህ ሊረዳ ሊደግፍ ይችላል ነው ምለው ነው
Well, Ethiopians voicing their dismay there. Now, moving on, scholars urge Africans to build their own independent media houses to cover their own affairs and fight against the misleading propaganda of the West. The Ethiopian Embassy in South Africa and the South African Ethiopian Professionals Association have held a Zoom conference. Kazaun Chane tells you more.
The Ethiopian Embassy in South Africa and the South African Ethiopian Professionals Association in South Africa held a meeting conference attended by media and Ethiopian scholars. The conference was attended by Ethiopian and international scholars, including Ethiopian prominent historian Professor Baharu Zode and Professor Angareld. On the occasion, the scholars underscored the injustice of some Western countries, economic pressure, and the media campaign against Ethiopia could exert psychological pressure at the national level.
Why the mainstream media, which is supposed to be a respectable body, has chosen to tell only one side of the story. There are always two sides to the story. I don't think mainstream media have ever, rarely at least, I wouldn't say ever, they have rarely bothered to check or to get the views of the Ethiopian side. Rather, they would have chosen to just trumpet the other side, the TPLF side. And as we all know, of course, the US has exerted all sorts of pressure, from sanctions imposed or threatened to psychological warfare, including, of course, the famous evacuation hysteria. So anyway, this psychological warfare, which was trumpeted repeatedly, is, I think, a disgrace for a power like the United States of America.
One issue that has stuck out for me is that many of those reporting on Ethiopia and the crisis in Ethiopia have proven sometimes in a very embarrassing way, to be lacking of knowledge on the wider context and the recent history. Ideas for course correction and in information error, governments must place a huge priority on staying ahead of the narrative. Being proactive in strategic communications, being progressive, and most importantly, being evidence-based. Being more secure as a country means being more open these days. These kind of announcements have come from countries like Canada and the UK these days. I mean, intelligence agencies will tell you that 95% of the intelligence they consume these days is all from open source. So the key to national security becomes transparency and openness.
Mesfin Demise at the Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs also highlighted the impact of fake information on the public. The government is doing its utmost and called on the international community and media outlets to come to Ethiopia and witness the atrocities committed by the TPLF terrorist group, Mesfin noted.
Now, in business, the practice of destruction and mass looting is the very characteristics of TPLF cliques. Wandafara Mulugeta, who is associate professor at the African Leadership Excellence Center, made this remark in an exclusive interview with ETV. He also said Ethiopia has lost huge capital as a result of illicit financial outflow of the TPLF terrorist group over the past 27 years. Haptam Washagri reports.
The practice of destruction and mass looting is the very beginning characteristics of TPLF cliques. In addition to the destruction of property directly affecting many lives, there is evidence emerging across many towns of grave atrocities and human rights abuse being inflicted by TPLF upon innocent civilians in various towns of the country. Talking to TV English, Wendafara Mulugeta, who is Associate Professor to Africa Leadership Excellence Center, said the recent massive destruction at Kombolcha Industrial Park is a showcase of how TPLF is a reckless element.
They have damaged about 40 industries in Kombolcha industry, and out of which 8 of them are already, the damage is rated as very high, just which we cannot construct and then at least allow them to enter into the market. And 28, the damage that happens on the 28 is somehow minor, which can be just repair, and then they can start operation. And 8 is somehow medium. This is as per the information provided by the Ministry of Industry. So it is very, very difficult to calculate the monetary value that happen by this destruction.
According to Wendafara, it is impossible to identify the financial crisis of destructed heavy industries due to many reasons.
The cost is not only monetary, it is also psychological. Already 11,000 workers, employees who are working on this, who are making their life on these industries, were also now jobless. And when you take it, the Ethiopian average family size, we're having 5 times 11. It's almost directly, apart from the investors, private investors, about 55,000 people are now without, without, a means to sustain their life.
The recent destruction of Kombolcha Industrial Park is bringing the multifaceted consequences to the government as well as the general public, Wendafara said.
Unemployment is now increasing. Again, this is another addition. So that's headache for the government. In addition, the government has lost the tax that would have been collected out of this. And this has also implication on widening the budget deficit. And some of the industries where, especially the heavy industries, were aligned to exports. Now we are losing, the hard currency that would have been obtained, as a result of which our trade balance deficit also is increasing. So both, just the damage, I can conclude that it doesn't belong only to one regional state, but it's nationwide.
According to the scholar, comparing the illicit money flow of the country over the past 2 decades is greater than other African countries.
This is their main characteristics. For the past 46, from the day that TPLF was established, their identity is just stealing and destruction. The capital flight from Ethiopia is over the capital flight from all other African countries during their 27 years.
Wendafara urged the government and the general public to play their share to rehabilitate and rebuild the destroyed industries in different towns in the country.
Colorful Cape Town is one of the most multiracial cities in the world. The city sits on South Africa's Cape Peninsula, where the waters of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans converge, and spectacular mountains tumble towards the sea. For decades, Cape Town has been buffeted too by the crosswinds of social upheaval. But just like those early ships, Cape Town had endured some of history's most turbulent waters and set course to an optimistic future. Cape Town's central area is situated in the City Bowl. This amphitheater-shaped area begins at the edge of Table Bay and is backed by the iconic 2-mile-long plateau of Table Mountain. post-apartheid South Africa is often called the Rainbow Nation, and like a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, diversity, transformation, and creativity shines out from the city's downtown streets, from its businesses, from its very walls. So come and savor the colors, hope, and freedom of Cape Town.
And finally, turning our attention to continental news, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, has urged Kenya and Somalia to ensure democratic and peaceful national elections, describing impeding polls as a litmus test to constitutionalism. While Kenya is set to hold general elections on August 9, 2022, Somalia deferred its elections, which were due on November 25. Tigist Sarnesa has produced the following story.
The Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, has held its annual assembly in Mombasa, Kenya. Speaking while delivering a State of the Region address in Mombasa, IGAD Executive Secretary Dr. Warqina Gabayyo emphasized on the need to resolve disputes arising from the election amicably through legal means.
The upcoming election in Somalia and Kenya, Your Excellencies, dear brothers and sisters, will serve as a litmus test of how deep constitutionalism has taken root in our region. As IGAD, we wish the government and the people of Kenya and Somalia peaceful, democratic, and successful elections which for the coming time.
While congratulating Ethiopia and Djibouti for holding peaceful polls, Dr. Gabayyo urged Somalia and Kenya to ensure democratic principles prevail before, during, and after the general elections in 2022.
IGAD is optimistic that democratic principles will continue to be upheld, and the practice of peaceful resolution of disputes through legal channels will be further entrenched to all electoral process in the region. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, let me remind this gathering that we are all stakeholders in peace building.
IGAD membership comprises of Djibouti, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, and Uganda. Dr. Gabayyo's remarks on Friday came at a time of heightened political temperatures, with presidential aspirants wooing eligible voters while also seeking to expand alliances.
And now a quick reminder of the top stories. Dozens of African countries and other friends oppose UN Human Rights Council resolution on Ethiopia.